Students, I'm supposed to teach you India's foreign policy. I hope you all are well conversed with English, and I will try to explain everything in English. And if possible, if there is any need, I will also explain it in Hindi if it is required. Well, India's foreign policy is a paper which you are taught in the final year after having studied all other papers in political science like political theory, political comparative politics, constitution, public administration, so on and so forth. And what is important here is to know that in order to understand foreign policy, which is part of the broader discipline of international relation, you need to also have knowledge of political theory, comparative politics, even constitution, public policy, public administration. Everything is part of the understanding of your foreign policy, because in the modern time, foreign policy is not supposed to be studied in isolation. It needs to be uh, understood in the larger context of political economy, political socialization, political culture, ideology. Everything has to be understood in order to have a larger perspective of foreign policy. Well, first of all, you need to know why foreign policy is important for us to understand or to know. It is because we are living in a world which is interdependent and interconnected, and therefore we have to have relationships with other countries the way we have our social relationships within the national boundary. We have also international relations. Here we have relations with the human beings in the society, and with other institutions and different processes in which we as human beings we get interaction with. But in international relation, we deal with abstract entities called nation states. Therefore, we have to have some mechanism through which we will have interaction between one state and the other and another. So the relationship between the two states or a group of states will be understood in the broad framework of their policies, programs, so on and so forth. So therefore, foreign policy is important to be understood in order to understand the nature and character of international relations and international politics. So the nature and character of global politics determines our national and local interest, because we live in a globalized world. So globalized world makes it contingent upon us to have knowledge about each other, and this knowledge comes from the policy documents of the nation states. Today, in this increasingly globalized world, nation states across the globe are getting interconnected so far as their economy, culture, and security needs are concerned, because we are living in a world which is faced with many challenges. Nation states have to negotiate with those challenges, and those challenges come from different quarters, like the economic challenges, security challenges, and so many other challenges from human security angles. But nation states are not independent, and they are not self-sufficient to fulfill all their needs. So therefore they have to depend upon others. For example, economic needs are such that no country can claim to have everything what it requires for its survival. So every country needs something or the other to be supplied from outside. So it is not possible for any country to remain in isolation. For development and progress, each nation is intrinsically linked to the world outside. Hence, it is important to understand how these relationships are based on complex interdependence. You must have already studied about the complex interdependence theory, the neoliberal theory. Uh, so there you have studied how cooperation and conflict have been seen as part of the international politics, and in this complex situation, interdependence is also created in a complex network of relationships. Okay, so there are conflicts, but at the same time, nation states also, cooperate with each other because they are dependent upon each other. Okay, it is in this context, I wish to look at India's foreign policy, or rather, I would say India's foreign economic policy in the 21st century, because in the 21st century, foreign policy is simply not about the bilateral or multilateral political relationship between nation states. It is a complex. It is based on complex interdependence. Therefore, your relationships are also based on your economic relationship. So, foreign economic relationship would be more apt to describe the foreign policy relationships. So, in the 21st century, we have seen how India has made some very drastic change in its policy towards other countries, and also at the same time it has maintained continuity. So, continuity and change are the hallmarks of India's foreign policy in the global politics today. So, we can explain foreign policy, first of all, as an extension of the domestic policy of the state. So, no foreign policy is insulated from the domestic policy, because what is happening inside the country will have its repercussions on your external policies as well, because there is a link between the internal and the external. So, our ideals, objectives, and aspirations as a nation will also be reflected in our foreign policy, which have to be, then propagated at the larger international domain through our foreign policy. The foreign policy, I would say, helps us understand our relationship with other countries based on our needs, which are diverse in nature, such as economic, political, ideological, and last but not least, the security aspect, which is very, very important in today's world, that our security is dependent upon so many factors that as a nation state alone, we cannot have an insulated kind of existence in which we devise our own security policy and programs without taking into account others in the neighborhood and in the extended larger neighborhood. So it is very important that we should also keep security as an important factor in the foreign policy making. And then understanding the foreign policy of India is important for any social scientist to develop a balanced kind of informed perspective on international issues having impact on our country. So, as social scientists or academicians in part of the intelligentsia, we need to also have understanding. This I am telling to explain as to why the knowledge of foreign policy is important for anyone. It is not about only students or those who are in the academic circle, that they should be understanding or knowing India's foreign policy, but for anyone who has some interest in foreign affairs, in international relations or international politics, needs to have the knowledge of the foreign policy. Foreign policy, you should know that, is very dynamic in character. Dynamic in the sense that it is subject to change according to the changing needs of time. But so far as the core values, ideals, and objectives are concerned, foreign policy of a country takes these things into account, and they remain almost very constant for all times to come. What I mean to tell you by saying this is that there has to be a perfect balance between your, the continuity as well as the changes in foreign policy. So any country which is playing a very significant role in international relations today, and is considered to be a major power, we have seen that they have maintained both continuity and change. Continuity, as far as continuity is concerned, uh, as I told you, that core values of the nation, the society, the ideals of our forefathers and our freedom movement, and the large long-term objectives which we have set before ourselves as a sovereign independent nation are supposed to be constituting our long-term continuous endeavors. So foreign policy needs to uh, you know uh, maintain both continuity as well as change. So therefore it is both dynamic, and it is also based on our core values, ideals, so on and so forth. There is no permanent frame or permanent enemy in international relations, as they say. So therefore, certain things have to constantly evolve and change. You cannot have friendship with one country for all times to come and maintain, enmity with another country for perpetuity. So it all depends on how the international scenario evolves with the course of time, and then how you are, visualizing a scenario in which you can, realize your best interest in the given circumstances. Accordingly, you should devise your foreign policy, adjust and readjust your long-term objectives, and thereby maintaining both your values, core ideals, so on and so forth, but at the same time adjusting and adapting to the changing scenarios in the world. So we need to understand the changing character of our relationship with our neighbors, the distant countries, based on the contemporary needs of our foreign policy goals. Now, coming to India and its relationship with the world, we have to, locate India in the larger context of the international community. So our journey started as a sovereign independent nation state 70 odd years before, when we got our independence. So we have evolved since as a mature democracy and an emerging economy and a formidable military power, from being the at the forefront of scientific and technological progress, which adds to our soft power status. So this is how we have evolved as a nation state, and accordingly we have set before ourselves certain goals and objectives as a nation state, which are based on our needs, our expectations, and the futuristic goals. And being one of the oldest civilizations, India has its own vision and aspirations, which are in tune with its philosophical, historical, and cultural ethos and traditions. So when we are engaging with the external world, which is the larger international community, we project ourselves as an ancient civilization with certain core values, cultural ethos, philosophical traditions, uh, historical achievements, so on and so forth. And that is what the image we create in front of the world. Secondly, as a soft power, uh, a most important aspect of our foreign policy is based on the core belief, as I said, in democracy, liberalism, multiculturalism, on the principle of secularism, free market economy. These are the characteristics of India as a nation state, which others perceive us as that we are a great democracy, we value liberalism, we respect multiculturalism, the principle of secularism is part and parcel of our cultural ethos, and then we subscribe to free market economy. So if you put all these characteristics together, then you find that India comes out as a very, very successful model of a true liberal democratic state. And then the historical and ideological underpinning of our foreign policy draws strength from the legacy of anti-colonial struggle. I am, giving you a large and broad, historical context to the making of India's foreign policy, and then I will come down to the basics of determinants and so on and so forth. So, as I was telling you, that the historical and ideological underpinning of our foreign policy has its strength in our anti-colonial struggle, the legacy of anti-colonial struggle during the freedom movement. And then India came out victorious of this long protracted anti-colonial struggle, and finally got its independence in 1947. And then India's image became a peace-loving country, which is, whose foreign policy is deeply embedded in this philosophy of peace and non-violence, and later refined as Gandhian traditions. So if you go back in history of India's tradition, you find that peace and non-violence are, intrinsic part of our social, cultural, and national fabric. So India also came to be known as a country that espoused the cause of peace, non-violence in the great traditions of Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi. So this is about making of India as such. I will come to making of India's foreign policy later on, because in order to understand the policy of a country, first of all, you need to know the country, what fabric it is constituted of. So, as for example, in order to understand an individual, you have to analyze his or her traits, characteristics. Similarly, a nation state is also to be understood on the basis of its characteristics, traits. So India, as I told you, has imbibed all these characteristics, and at the international level we are known as such, as a democracy, as a vibrant democracy with liberal principles and liberal political culture embedded in our political system, and then free market economy, where we have given the state lesser role. But that is a different issue, that the state had greater role in the economy earlier, and that had also a lot to do with India's foreign economic policy in the post-colonial era. But later on, since 1990, we have seen how the role of the state has diminished to a great extent. So that is a different aspect of the foreign economic policy, which I will discuss later. Now, coming to the context in which India's foreign policy in the post, independence era is concerned. Now, for a moment, you go back to the post Second World War period, and then you see how India emerged as a sovereign, independent nation state in that Cold War period after the Second World War was over. So India was not the only country that had gained independence and became a sovereign, independent state. The whole fabric of international nature and character of international community changed after the Second World War, as more and more newly independent nation states came into existence, and they became legitimate members of the international community. So after 1945, there was a drastic change in the nature and character of the international society, with a large number of newly independent nation states joining the international community, who were uh, granted independence after the Second World War by their respective colonial masters. Because we know that after the Second World War, the era of colonialism, in the formal sense of the term, came to an end. So we entered into a new world, and India was one such country which had gained its independence, and India, therefore, was supposed to now start its new journey in the world, and therefore, its foreign policy needs to be examined in the right perspective. So, Cold War is the larger international context in which we have to understand India's foreign policy. So Cold War, I won't go into the details of Cold War, as you have already studied about the Cold War, 1945 to 1990, 45 years duration, in which there was the international politics was characterized by bipolarity. One pole versus the other. One pole led by United States of America and the entire Western Europe and other countries of the world in Asia and other continents, Australia, and the other one led by Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and its allies. But where do you see India as a sovereign independent country pursuing its independent foreign policy? Because we took a principled stand on several issues which confronted us in the external domain. We had our own issues, challenges, we had our own objectives, but we were confronted with a world that was, severely challenged by the Cold War politics. So the Cold War politics created situations which were adversarial in nature as far as India was concerned. For example, the impact of the economic recession, continuing since the time of Second World War was there. There was arms race. There was rampant underdevelopment all over the world. There was therefore this north-south divide between the developed and the underdeveloped countries. So India therefore was faced with a serious challenge. So if I take you back to our historical, cultural, and anti-colonial struggle legacies, you will understand that India stood for something else. We did not look forward to a world which was divided by Cold War. We did not look forward to a world which was threatened by arms race. We did not want to, live with poverty, underdevelopment, illiteracy, so on and so forth. So therefore, development was one of our, primary objectives. And then we did not want the world to be divided between north or south or east or west. So we wanted, as I said, a peaceful world order where development is possible for every country, small and big, and every country should have the bare minimum so that justice and equity are guaranteed to all. But unfortunately, India was not to be granted its, wish to see a world that is free from hunger, free from war, free from violence, and so on and so forth. So we confronted a world that was not so very conducive, a place where India's much cherished ideals and objectives in the post war period or post independence period could be achieved. Okay, so now what India stood for and why I'm telling you all this is that what we did or confronted based on those factors and the actors of the Cold War, we devised our foreign policy. So in order to understand the post-independent foreign policy of India, you need to first of all understand the context, the ground realities, the challenges, and the other complexities of international relations at that point of time. So a historical perspective and a historical, understanding is important to to conceptualize what India's foreign policy was at that point of time. So as I told you that being a newly independent nation state, born in the third world, so-called third world, because the first and second world being the liberal capitalist world and the communist socialist world, we were not able to identify ourselves in any way with those, countries. So they were indulging in bloc politics, Cold War politics, which we had no interest in. We did not have any interest in that. So what we visualized was that a new world order based on the vision of a multipolar world. So the world was divided into two poles. This is known as bipolar world. But we did not want a bipolar world. So therefore, we thought of creating a multipolar world free from nuclear weapon, poverty, hunger, malnutrition, illiteracy, so on and so forth. So this is something which was a very, very comprehensive, aspirational vision of India, which was, propagated by the forefathers of our freedom movement, and we carried it forward under the Nehruvian idealism. This articulates India's stand on equity and justice in world affairs. That means India wanted to create a world that was based on equity and justice. And equity and justice means that every country, small and big, powerful and not so powerful, should have the bare minimum to survive and live in a dignified way. So, the whole idea of human rights, it is not only, for individual, it is also for the collective called the nation. So, human right talks about what? That certain rights which are intrinsically linked to human dignity. So the nations are also a collective entity which need to have dignity in their existence in the world. So therefore, India talked about equity and justice for all. India envisaged a world order based on anti-imperialism. So, these are the core principles of India's foreign policy. So, if you have a broad idea of these principles, then you will be able to understand the post-independence foreign policy of India in the right perspective. So, anti-imperialism is something which we thought was necessary for the world to embrace in order to create a world that is based on justice and equity and democracy. Because imperialism had done a lot of harm to the international community, particularly those nations, states which are located in the erstwhile colonial world in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Then anti-racism. See, racism was propagated, used as a foreign policy tool by the developed European states in those times of imperialism. And this is something against humanity, this is against human race, and this is against the principle of natural justice of equality. Based on equality. So, racism also is something which we, entirely rejected as a foreign policy tool. Then we talked about new international economic order in our foreign policy. New international economic order is something which the uh, uh, you know, countries like India, which had gained their independence in the post-Second World War period, wanted to replace the existing one. The existing one was based on the Bretton Woods system created by the Western countries led by America, in which the IMF, World Bank, and the GATT as institutional mechanism, was created. But that economic system or order, according to India, was, you know, grossly inadequate and discriminatory in nature and sometimes exploitative in character. So therefore, we wanted that the international community should have a new international economic order in which the equity, fair play, transparency in economic relationship, a lessening of trade gaps and trade deficits, and then, transfer of technology, sharing of technology, and easy access to international finance, and international banking and financial institutions not playing a dubious role of promoting the interests of developed countries. All these things were, challenged by the concept of neo, and India was one of those leading non-aligned countries which, espoused the cause of new international economic order. Then the most important thing which India wanted at the international level, in the larger international domain, was to democratize every institution and to make it more participative and inclusive in nature. Otherwise, we have seen prior to the end of the Second World War, international institutions were primarily, constructed and, run by Western countries based on their own vested interests. So they deliberately kept a large section of international community outside the framework of the international institutions which they created from time to time. But post-independence era international politics, India wanted to start a new narrative in international politics, where institutions like UNO, United Nations, was expected to be, created and run based on democratic principles of equal sharing, equal participation, and exercise of equal power. So, I mean, we have been very critical of the veto power of the permanent five. Why they should be having exclusive power of veto when the rest don't have. So UN, therefore, as India said, or India wanted, needed to be democratized. Then comes another very important aspect of international politics of that era, that is called the Cold War tension, which was, aggravated, accentuated by things like arms race. Arms race had something which India did not approve of, was the economic cost as well as its overall impact on the international environment in terms of creating tension and stress in bilateral and multilateral relationship. When there is arms race between and amongst nation states, it has therefore two repercussions. One is that it entails or involves a lot of expenditure, military expenditure, to develop new weapons of all kinds, like normal conventional weapons to non-conventional weapons such as nuclear weapon, atom bombs, so on and so forth. So that is the economic part. The other part is, when you have an arms race, it unnecessarily creates tension, anxiety, and stress in the region, thereby affecting not only bilateral political relationship, but also it has its larger impact on the economic activities in the region. So therefore, arms race is something which India stood against. So against arms race, what you should be propagating? India propagated comprehensive disarmament. It is not only disarmament but comprehensive disarmament, because disarmament as such was tried by the nuclear powers, the big powers, from time to time during the phase of Depan and other such provisions. But that did not work because there was hypocrisy in that. I mean, you cannot quantitatively reduce some arms and they then say that you have disarmed. That may be partially true, but it is not complete or comprehensive unless it is done in a full and comprehensive manner by focusing on the qualitative aspect of it. So both qualitative and quantitative disarmament is required when it is completely comprehensive, where all the countries, big and small, powerful and not so powerful, nuclear and non-nuclear, everyone goes for total disarmament. Then only we can achieve the goals of peace, real peace. Okay. So the other thing which India stood for or propagated in the post independence era was the focus on collective security as against uh, balance of power security. And collective security is something which is guaranteed by international organization like United Nations. But if you go for balance of power, security game, then it is left to the individual nation states to have their own, system in place to guarantee national security. So that is something which promotes, more, mm, bad blood between nation states, and they create enmity and they perpetuate their hostilities. So collective security on the other hand, which India subscribed to, uh, was to guarantee real security to all nation states, where one nation threatened by another would be provided with security by all other nations of the United Nations. So an attack on one member state would be considered as attack on all other countries. So everybody comes to the rescue of that, uh, you know, uh, country which is subjected to aggression by the belligerent country. So now, if you analyze these, factors which were there in the backdrop, in the background when India developed its, formulated its foreign policy, you will have a fair idea of what India was actually trying to do. So it is all about creating a new world order, which of course did not cut much ice, given the kind of Cold War, politics was concerned, but it laid the foundation of an alternative narrative in international politics in the post Second World War period. I forgot to mention two more points that in that vision which India had. Just an equitable distribution of resources, so that you can include in the new international economic order, in which just and equitable distribution of world's resources was something which India wanted, so that the underdeveloped countries will have, if not equal but equitable share of world's resources to embark on the path of development which they had envisioned at the time of independence. And then uh, India, in the formative years of its independence, as we all know, we had a socialist orientation in our economy. We, though introduced a mixed economy, but there was a heavy, inclination towards, the socialist ideals and socialist, goals of our state. Uh, so this also was reflected in our foreign policy towards other countries, our affinity, closeness, friendship with the Afro-Asian countries, speaks of this kind of socialist orientation in which we also thought of their development, their well-being, and therefore we wanted to create a platform, which I will talk about non-alignment later on, which created the background for the non-aligned movement. Uh, After that, one contextual reality you need to understand as far as India's foreign policy is concerned was the three major wars which we fought initially after independence. That also had its bearing on the making of India's foreign policy. Uh, it also therefore uh, it, it made us convinced that mere idealism will not always pay. Therefore we need to be also very prudent about protecting our territorial integrity and national sovereignty, and successive governments have emphasized on this aspect also. So the post independence foreign policy cannot be only seen in the prism of Nehruvian idealism. It is also to be understood in the pragmatic policies of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, followed by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and now today Narendra Modi. So, but going back again to 1947, 1962, 1965, 1971, these four wars, or you can say China, also formed the overall narrative of India's security as far as India's foreign policy is concerned. So therefore, we have recognized two major regional rivals, oblique competitors, oblique enemy, that is the Pakistan and China. And therefore, whenever we try to understand our foreign policy, the strategic interest of India has to be analyzed, understood, and explained in terms of our bilateral relationship with Pakistan and China. So that is another aspect of our understanding of international foreign policy. The other aspect is India's foreign policy towards the then superpowers during the Cold War. That also has its own, dynamics. We need to understand that in the right perspective when we discuss in detail the relationship with them individually. Then now the contemporary challenges and opportunities in which we have to see India's foreign policy. Uh, the we have now entered into a new phase of international relations where international politics has been entirely based on has been created, and it has been molded entirely based on real politics, and geopolitics plays a very important role in that. So we have to understand the post-Cold War scenario in a different light as far as India is. Hello, student. Shall we get back to the discussion again? Okay, so far I have explained you the broad, contours of India's foreign policy in the post-independence period. The determinants, objectives I have discussed, determinants we will discuss, but before that I will complete the the post Cold War phase, in which certain new challenges and opportunities have emerged, uh, on the basis of which we need to now visit India's foreign policy goals and objectives in the post Cold War period. Uh, the new world order, which came into existence in the 1990s with the end of Cold War, was something which India had to, to locate itself and recalibrate its foreign policy accordingly. Uh, the important thing is that in this phase, India was confronted not only with challenges which also existed in the past, but this time India also found uh, certain opportunities to be grabbed, because after 70 odd years, India had reached a stage where global stage where India was raring to go for the next phase in its life as a nation, to play a more important role in world politics. So uh, let us understand what the post Cold War international order was like. Uh, so there was, now mostly people started talking about unipolarity in place of bipolarity, because the Cold War had come to an end, Soviet Union had been dissolved, and there was only one superpower. So therefore people started that bipolarity has gone, and now US is the only pole that exists. So therefore the international political order needs to be understood in terms of unipolarity. But that was not true, because as we entered the last decade of the 20th century, that is 1990s, a new world order also brought about economic globalization. And economic globalization paved the way for a multipolar world which existed alongside the US dominance that characterized unipolarity of the political order. So therefore, we need to understand the complex situation of a political order that was primarily, dictated and governed by America and its allies, and the multipolar world order, which was taking gradual shape because of the advent of globalization, particularly economic globalization. And India therefore had to adjust to this new reality, while ensuring its national interest under those trying circumstances. What was India's national interest? Most importantly, India's national interest was, you know, defined in terms of our economic interests to start with, and later on it became our national security interest. So we have to understand the post-Cold War international politics uh, and India's foreign policy in the context of globalization and national security. Uh, the old and the familiar order was passing, and an emerging order was coming in, which was both fluid and uncertain. I mean, the first 10 years, that is 1990 onwards till the end of the century, that was very, very, very fluid. International politics was in a flux. There were a lot of other things happening, such as ethnic conflict in many parts of the world, political disintegration in Europe, Eastern Europe, so on and so forth. So the international landscape was very chaotic and unpredictable. USA influence, gradually began to, decline in a different way, because the Chinese influence began to expand because of globalization. So this is also the time when we have to see how, US unipolar world led by USA to start with, gradually paved the way for a, if not a multipolar world, but another power, that was China, which began to expand its influence on others, uh, primarily because of its economic prowess, but later on it got translated into political and military, power of China, that played a crucial role in, juxtaposing or putting China vis-a-vis USA. But that happened later on. We can say that it happened after 2001. This became very, very prominent because America was confronted with another, challenge of global terrorism. Uh, so uh, this is the time when no guarantee of security was coming from any country, because no superpower politics or Cold War politics was there. So therefore, security was not something which was given because of ideological affinity or ideological closeness to any country. So therefore, every country was left to fend for itself as far as security was concerned, and India was also another country, another such country which had to also think of its own security. So India's foreign policy during this time was, was directed towards not only creating a new economic narrative in the country, but also was expected to put in place a viable, security infrastructure in place. So therefore, we went for that nuclear explosion in 1998, Pokhran 2, and we became a nuclear weapon state. So this explains as to how India's security, dilemma and security interest, changed the whole narrative of India's foreign, policy thinking in the post-Cold War period. Then we have seen how we have, confronted with a belligerent China over a period of time in the 21st century, early 21st century, and then we have a constant pain in the neck in the neighborhood called Pakistan, and it became all the more dangerous when Pakistan also became a nuclear state, following our nuclear program and nuclear blast, and therefore at that point of time, India was confronted with two belligerent neighbors. One was threatening directly to India's, territorial integrity. The other one was both a threat to India's territorial integrity and economic interest. That was China. So try to understand how complex the situation is, where India was to devise its new foreign policy, its a new economic and security policy. So that's a very, very interesting time to know how India negotiated with those challenges, but at the same time how India also reaped the benefit of the opportunities that came in the form of economic liberalization and globalization. Uh, uh, I don't want to go into the details of the Chinese, agenda in the region, but we have to only keep that in mind that when we formulated our foreign policy in the post-Cold War period, obviously China figured prominently in our scheme of things. Then coming to the Pakistani factor, we know how cross-border terrorism has been used as an instrument of of Pakistan's foreign policy, and how proxy war and territorial misadventurism have been part and parcel of their strategy and tactics against India. So they keep us engaged all the time in the borders. So that also had its reflections on the Kashmiri secessionist movement, which no more remained indigenous, as they say, after 1990s. It became, an international, challenge for us, with the involvement of terror organization and non-state actors and the state actor called Pakistan, and tacit support of China to Pakistan. So these are very, very complex security issues which we have to also keep in mind when we try to understand India's new foreign policy in the post-Cold War period. So apart from that, there were many domestic, factors and determinants which, form the basis of our understanding of how India's foreign policy should be devised in the changing times, be it insurgencies in Northeast, economic challenges, communalism, domestic political discourse in which all these narratives, Hindutva versus fringe elements, and Islamophobia, and so on and so forth. All these things also became very, very prominent in the course of time, as a result of which the political discord within the country, became a very, very contentious factor in the foreign policy making, because foreign policy, as we know, is supposed to be based on broad consensus, at least consensus amongst the political parties. So there has to be total consensus over the foreign policy from the time of Nehru till Mrs. Gandhi, and maybe after that to some period. This broad consensus was something which was considered as sacrosanct and was respected. But of late, we have seen that binaries have developed, and there are political differences which have their implications and reflections on the foreign policy positions of the government of the day, and thereby creating an impression that as if this country is not unanimous and united on certain aspects of foreign policy, which is very, very, but it is because political parties, opposition and the government, they most of the time are found to have difference of opinion on various aspects of foreign policy. Okay, so I was discussing about the challenges which India faced after the process of globalization started and a new world order came into existence. So India had to now focus more on its economic policies. But since, as I told you, since India was not a very self-sufficient country, it had to fall back upon the outside world, and outside world was now having a new system based on globalization, in which India had to interact. So therefore we had to also change many things as far as our economic system was concerned, as far as our economic policies were concerned. As you know, we were a mixed economy with socialist orientation. So all these things had to be changed. So India's foreign policy from now on has to be understood in terms of India's foreign economic policy. So countries like America in the Western world, with whom we had not much, very strong economic ties during the Cold War period, now we had to recalibrate and, reshape our policy towards America. Similarly, also we, snapped our, ties with many East European countries with whom we were having, relationship for our military procurements and defense needs, because our focus was now economic development, and we thought that we can, give it a break, like, our spending on defense for some time. And if at all there was need, we thought that there is a larger market outside where we can buy our, things from other countries. So therefore, the entire gamut of bilateral and multilateral relationship for India, underwent a drastic change during this period when we established our new relationships with countries with whom we did not have relationship during the Cold War, and we also had to, disconnect ourselves from countries with whom we had, some relationship with regard to our defense needs and other things in the past. So it's a now new kind of a situation in which we were working. But at the same time, as I told you, the change and continuity always remain our primary focus. The continuity means that India still, despite all these changes taking place outside and taking place within the country, still pursued its, foreign policy based on its core values and beliefs, such as international peace, international, brotherhood, internationalism as such, and the whole idea of democratizing the world order, reshaping new architecture of global governance, multipolarism. So certain idealistic visions were also embedded in our foreign policy, and we talked about the non-violent world order. We still continue to talk about nuclear disarmament, comprehensive nuclear disarmament, which has not happened till now, for which we are also paying the price, because today we are not signed the NPT, and therefore, because it is discriminatory in nature and not comprehensive in its goal, therefore we have not signed the NPT. So therefore, we are not being considered as eligible for many things, including membership in the NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group, which would have facilitated supply of nuclear fuel for our civil nuclear programs in the country. But we are, suffering on that count. But still, we are, harping on that one principle, that it has to be a comprehensive nuclear disarmament. Apart from that, there are many issues which India today thinks that needs collective, collaborative, cooperative efforts of the international community to confront with, and those challenges are so enormous that no one country today is capable of handling or confronting those problems. So therefore, problems like global challenges such as climate change, international terrorism, nuclear proliferation, the energy security, which is very much essential today, because today's modern economy is energy driven, and if there is not enough energy supply or minimum guarantee of energy supply to national economies, the entire international economic structure will collapse. There are challenges like cyber crimes, money laundering, fake currency. These are all non-conventional security threats to the states today. Human trafficking, migration, forced migration, refugee problem, poverty, hunger, malnutrition. All these are very, very comprehensive issues and challenges before the international community. So India as a nation state, subscribe to the idea of a global order, which is, based on the appreciation and understanding of these problems for all nation states for all times to come. The classic example of this is the global pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19 today, which has assumed such great proportion. It has overwhelmed the entire world, and this is a classic example of how something which nation states had never thought of even thought to have such potential to threaten their national security. Health hazard, public health security is at stake today. So the entire world is under threat, unprecedented threat. It can kill millions people. It's just the beginning. So how will you negotiate with these problems? Alone you cannot. So therefore, a true multipolar democratic world is what India espouses, is the cause which India espouses and tries to create in the uh, times to come. So therefore, India's focus on multipolarism is a very well thought through vision, which has been accepted and appreciated by a lot of countries in the world. Now we have to see how we move forward with this agenda. Now, so now we have to come back to discuss uh, the present era, in which we have a strong national government at the center in India, uh, which believes in consultation and consent to resolve bilateral as well as multilateral issues. That means we believe in dialogue, discussion, and mediation to resolve international disputes, whether it is bilateral or multilateral. So our core, idea rests on our belief on uh, the merit of democratic, methods of, you know, talks, discussion, dialogue, so on and so forth. This government has a very clear-cut policy as far as cross-border terrorism is concerned, that terror has to stop and then the talks will resume. Talks are important, but talks cannot, happen only when there is chaos and noise all around. Chaos and noise created by the terror attacks and assaults on Indian territorial sovereignty. Uh, Kashmir issue remains an issue for us, but it cannot be considered as a core issue that should be, uh, taken up by Pakistan and India on a priority basis. So we want that India and Pakistan should resolve all their outstanding issues, including the issue of Kashmir, but in a more civilized and more democratic way. So that is the core focus of India's foreign policy towards Pakistan. We have made it very clear. But of late, we have seen India has also started pursuing, that is called hot pursuits, which India has adopted, where India is going for proactive and radical measures against such elements which are threatening India's territorial integrity. Uh, with regard to China, uh, India pursues the policy of engagement, despite all misgivings and territorial claims and counterclaims in the background. We still have maintained our cordial relationship with Pakistan in a spirit of collaboration and competition. China, has this strategy that it will compete with, India as far as its economic interest is concerned, and it will collaborate with India as far as vision, as far as the vision or vision of a multipolar world is concerned, to counter USA. But at the same time, it will keep India engaged in border skirmishes and will keep its claims on India's territories alive, to keep it engaged in the frontiers. Uh, India believes that Chinese perceive India to be a rival and a global competitor, which might surpass its economic power in future. China has this problem, which when we discuss China in detail, we will discuss how from the very beginning China sees India to be a competitor. Uh, so they want to tie India down with low-scale military conflicts and territorial issues, as we have seen from Doklam to the recent ones. There are, low-intensity border skirmishes between the two countries, but India has maturely, handled these issues. Uh, and their growing relationship with China is a cause of concern for us, but we have been watching their relationship very closely, and accordingly we are preparing for the future. The way forward, there's a lot of things can be said about what India should be doing, or India should be uh, responding as far as the evolving situations are concerned. One very good thing India has done in the recent crisis, Corona crisis, that despite all the provocations, India has remained, you know, glued to its effort to fight coronavirus, and not unnecessarily indulging in, bilateral, bickerings with China, or blaming, as the Western countries are indulging in blame games as far as the virus is concerned, how it came, where it came from, and all that. India has not done any such thing. So that's a very good thing India has opted to do at this moment. Uh, the focus India should be having today is to strengthen foreign economic relationship with all countries, given the kind of future challenges one might foresee for an emerging power like India. As we know that we are an emerging economy, we are poised to be a $5 trillion economy in the next 3 4 years, and this economy is energy driven economy. We need constructive engagement with countries from where we have sources of energy supply to this country. We should also open up our uh, negotiations and bilateral relationship with countries with whom we can from whom we can get our alternative sources of energy, like non-conventional sources of energy. you know uh, Petroleum products and gases, we are dependent upon the Middle East. But as far as the non-conventional sources of energy, like the wind, the ocean, and the other sources of energy, which the developed countries are exporting, we need to also have good relationship with them, to open up new avenues for supply of energy to India, including the nuclear energy, which we can develop in our country with the active collaboration with the Western countries. Uh, at the same time, our strategic environment needs to be also given utmost priority, where we have to see the immediate neighborhood from all sides, whether it is Central Asia, Afghanistan, Middle East, or Southeast Asia, South China Sea, the Indo-Pacific region. All these are now potential, targets of Chinese, adventurism. They have, historically, maintained their, territorial claims over many countries in this region. But now India is poised to play a very important role in all these regions, be it, Pacific region, be it South China Sea, because Vietnam is a very close ally of India, economic ally. Uh, then South Asia, Middle East, because of many factors. So we have to look at that aspect also. And look East policy, act East policy of the present Narendra Modi government are some of the examples of how we are trying to, cobble up a very, very I mean, productive relationship with these countries located in the regions, extended neighborhood. Uh, so again, Africa, I feel that we need to revive the Afro-Asian solidarity, the spirit of Afro-Asian solidarity, which we celebrated during the time of non-alignment, and uh, you know we should shift our focus to African countries for investment and economic ties to you know uh, to have a alternative mechanism of absorbing investment and also disposing of our manufactured goods in a fair manner. So that's it. As this is an overview of India's foreign policy since independence till now, and then we will shift to a new arena where we will discuss the determinants of India's foreign policy and objectives. Most of the objectives I have discussed in the course of my last 1.5 hour discussion with you. And as far as the determinants are concerned, determinants are the factors. I mean, nothing happens in a vacuum, you must understand. It is like you do something, but if you when you are doing it, you are influenced by many other factors and actors. So that is very important to understand. And determinants of India's foreign policy, I would say that you have to have two different types of determinants. One is the continuous and permanent determinants, in which you have to understand the role of geography, economy, political system, and then your political ideology, political leaders, so on and so forth. So determinants of India's foreign policy again will have to be seen as post independence determinants and the new age determinants. New age, what I mean by new age determinant, are the ones which are now becoming more and more relevant and significant as far as India's foreign policy is concerned. For example, terrorism. Terrorism, I would say, is a very important determinant of India's foreign policy today, which probably was not heard of at the time of independence. When Nehru was his own foreign minister, he would have never thought of considering terror as an instrument of any other country's foreign policy. But today we are confronted with a country which is promoting terrorism from across the border, as well as it is using terror as a instrument of its foreign policy itself. So non-state actors under such states and the states themselves, acting as terror outfits, is something which we need to understand as a new factor in India's foreign policy. Similarly, I would say nuclear proliferation. For a very long time, since the Second World War, the world witnessed only uh, you know 5 countries at a stretch, one after another, becoming nuclear weapon states. After that, there was a long silence before India and Pakistan became nuclear weapon states. And then we see a very uh, a rapid growth in nuclear proliferation with suspect countries like North Korea, then Israel, and Iran. These countries are said to be having nuclear program, and they might one fine day declare that they have developed their nuclear weapons. So nuclear proliferation is again another important determinant of India's foreign policy, because the way Pakistan got hold of nuclear weapon and then pursued its nuclear program with the active support of China is a major threat to India's security. So therefore, uh, we need to take that into account when we, devise our foreign policy in the 21st century. And the third important dynamic determinant of India's foreign policy, I would say, is globalization itself. This was not a determinant in the post-independent India when the foreign policy was devised. So the process of globalization in itself has a lot of, you know, deep impact on in the making of India's foreign policy, because today India's foreign policy is known as India's foreign economic policy. So we will very briefly discuss in the next 15 minutes uh, as to why and how these determinants have played their roles in the making of the foreign policy. You see, as I said, geography, economy, political system, your historical legacy, culture, these things are permanent determinants of foreign policy of any country. Wherever they exist, irrespective of the continent, these things, you know, determine the foreign policy very, very significantly. As far as India is concerned, how do you see geography as a determinant of India's foreign policies? Obviously, the the geographical space or location where we are placed plays an important role, in the sense that the climate, the topography, the oceans, and the mountains, all of them have, uh, you know, uh, their roles in the making of foreign policy, directly or indirectly. For example, we have discussed that security interests or security needs are part and parcel of the foreign policy concern of a country. So, as far as India's security is concerned, how do you think India should have, uh, you know, uh, should have put in place a policy which would, ensure its, maritime security? That means India will have to have good relationship with the countries which are located in the maritime, you know, outreach of India. For example, Sri Lanka and the Southeast Asian countries, Maldives, and, you know, other countries in the near vicinity within the territorial, sovereignty of India. We need to have good relationship. We now come to hear about how China is trying to, encircle uh, India from all sides. Pearl of, string of, pearls theory. So all these need to be understood in the context of geographical factor. So we have to, because we have a very long, maritime line, that is the coastal line. So that is a disadvantage for us. What happened in the Mumbai terror attack? The terrorists came through the sea route, and we were quite vulnerable. Our national security was threatened, was compromised with. So geography here is a very, very important, uh, you know, determinant of foreign policy. Similarly, the huge mountains. I mean, Himalayas are a very important natural, wall, which, helps India in protecting its national, territorial security. So that gives us a natural barrier from the enemy. It creates, hurdles. Similarly, if you put it in the reverse situation, certain things also, certain geographical features also creates disadvantage for us. For example, the deserts of Rajasthan. It's a huge stretch of border which we have to protect from the Pakistanis. So many a time we see infiltrators coming through the Rajasthan side, the desert side. So sometimes that becomes very difficult. So geography needs to be very understood in a very uh, uh, critical context. And one more thing, climate. And climate is very important, which is part of your geography, because climate is responsible for your economic activities. We have seen Africa as underdeveloped because of what? Because of adverse climatic condition in that whole continent, where economic activities cannot happen the manner it happens in the Mediterranean climate in Europe or America. So it is very important to know all those things. So geography, uh, and then economy. Obviously, a healthy economy, a strong economy is always a very important, determinant of foreign policy, because it gives strength to your national power. If your national power is, you know, uh, quite substantial in terms of economic, capabilities and economic wealth, then obviously you can play an important role in world politics. Look at America, or for that matter, today China. Their foreign policy is very aggressive and proactive because they have the economic power to not only sustain themselves as big powers, potential powers, but also to sell themselves as, major powers or superpowers or great powers in the world. You have to have, money, wealth, and resources to, you know dispense with others. So that is very important. A strong national economy contributes to a strong national power. And national power, therefore, is linked to your national economy. If you are poor, underdeveloped, then obviously you are not expected to have a strong foreign policy vis-a-vis others. Then comes the political leadership, political system, or political ideology. I club them together to discuss this particular determinant in the context of foreign policy, where you have to understand that political system has a lot of bearing on your foreign policy. What kind of a political system you are, whether you are a democracy, whether you are a military or a dictatorial state, despotic, ruled by a despotic ruler, it matters a lot in international politics. It is seen that it is understood that the international community is more comfortable with democratic regimes. So it has been observed that democratic states post Second World War international order have played a very important role in international politics, be it America, be it the Europe, and the whole process of democratization of the entire colonial world after independence or after the Second World War, is something which we have to understand how important it is to be a democratic country in the world. Your acceptance depends on what kind of a ruler you are. Obviously, our acceptance in the world would be much easier amongst the nation state compared to a regime such as, the erstwhile Gaddafi of Libya, or Saddam Hussein of Iraq, or for that matter, the present day Syria. So democracy pays. This is called democratic dividend. So that is what. But at the same time, other political systems also have their, impact on foreign policy. For example, the Nazi Germany is a political system which gave the whole, you know, idea of a racial superiority to the Germans. And Nazism, the political system under Hitler, created havoc in the world. So their foreign policy was, you know, created around this vision of a world being dominated by the superior Nazi race. So that is something we have to understand. So as far as India is concerned, we are a democratic country, a parliamentary democracy with a credible, political system that has been functional so far. So we have added advantage to that. So that is political system. Then political ideology. So gone are those days of ideology to a great extent today, but it is very important to understand ideology as a determinant of foreign policy, which is very contextual at the time of the Cold War politics. So we have seen how ideology played a very important role in so far as American foreign policy was concerned, so far as the Soviet foreign policy was concerned, and for that matter, Indian foreign policy was concerned. Because we too had also an ideology called non-alignment. So our policies were also dictated by, our foreign policy is dictated by the non-aligned principles. And the third one is the political leadership. It's also a very important determinant of foreign policy because the individuals, the charismatic leaders, play a very important role insofar as the making of foreign policy is concerned and making that foreign policy relevant to the purpose of the entire mankind is concerned. For example, Nehru. Nehru was the architect of India's foreign policy in the post, independence era, and his indelible, impression on India's foreign policy is something which we have been talking about till now. So sometimes such characters, such charismatic leaders come in the national life and they leave behind indelible mark on foreign policy making. So whether it is Nehru, whether it is Adolf Hitler, or whether it is in China, in Mao Zedong, so all these people have left their